What's up, y'all? Welcome back. I'm your host, Will McFadden. I've got Tori McElhaney and Terrin Walk, and we are here to break down joint practices. We're going to start at the top with a little bit of a follow-up to the first preseason game. I apologize. I told y'all you would have a final whistle coming Monday, but because of the way that the game ended, we decided just to press pause on that. It's still, we're working through the kinks, and we felt like that wasn't the right time to kind of go through that exercise. So everything, if it goes according to plan, we will have another final whistle on Monday for you all after this second preseason game. But kind of to share some thoughts on that preseason, the first preseason game, because you didn't hear from us, we're going to start briefly at the top. Just talk about one guy that we each picked that we felt either kind of built throughout these two joint practices or maybe took a step back after a strong preseason game and maybe needs to kind of reignite that fire this weekend. So, Tori, we'll start with you. Mm-hmm. After Friday's preseason game, was there somebody you felt really stood out in that game that kind of either did a great job these last couple of practices or maybe took a step back?
For me, it was D'Angelo Malone. I was very fascinated with the cross-training that he has been doing at inside linebacker and more traditionally coming off the edge. And that has been something that I feel like I've spent a lot of time on this week asking Jeff Ulbrich, Raheem Morris, even D'Angelo himself, what this transition has looked like for him. Because I do think that this is the coaches really valuing. Yes, he is a special teams guy. I believe Raheem said he is the barnyard bully on special teams, and that is his starting role. But the fact that they're going to have to make hard decisions on a 53-man roster, and you have to provide more value than just special teams. And so they're actively trying to figure out how to add value to him within this defensive unit. And he is somebody who, like Jeff Ulbrich said, there were so many guys that when Jeff Ulbrich came in and started evaluating this roster, he's like, there was a lot of guys who are jack of all trades, versatility, master of nothing type of players. And that's what he said. And I thought that was a fair, they'd been in so many different systems that had asked them to do so many different things. They didn't have time or honestly the capabilities to be like, we can only focus on this one thing. So for someone like D'Angelo Malone, it kind of got lost in the shuffle. Well, as time has gone on this preseason, I've been really excited about what I've seen him, particularly playing a depth role within inside linebackers and off the edge. They're really full off the edge. And so we only got to see him a little bit. But what I saw from him at inside linebacker, I thought was pretty important as you're talking about roster cutdowns, as you're talking about people who add value across the entire 53-man. So he was somebody who, if I'm talking movers and shakers up and down the roster, he's someone that after I saw what he did in that first preseason game and the cross-training and the reps he got at both spots, he immediately shot up a bit for me.
And you have a movers and shakers piece that comes up after these preseason games. So anybody who wants more of an idea of really who we saw kind of rise or fall after a preseason game, go check that out. But D'Angelo Malone is a player we talked a lot about last preseason as somebody who really stood out to us. I think, Terrin, you were the one that identified him and was like, man, number 51 out there, he's doing a lot. Was there anybody you saw in this first preseason game that you felt the same way about?
Well, you can always find my standouts from a game in the game breakdown that'll publish right at the buzzer every game. And this week in the preseason game, I did a defensive and offensive. And instead of going into detail about them, go read it. But the names are DeMarco Hellams, which I don't think anyone is surprised, and Easton Stick. So those are my standouts. But the area, because you said going into joint practices, what you wanted to see more of and whatnot, I think my quote-unquote flag of concern would have to be the run game, especially with the second-team offensive line. Because if you look at the numbers, the Falcons only had 22 rushing yards against the Lions, and 9 of them came from quarterback Emory Jones. So that's like, you want to see more. You need to see more. And so that's something I hope they focused on in joint practices. I don't know that we saw any big runs, but it's so complicated in training camp because it isn't take them to the ground. So you never really know who would break a tackle or who would make it through the field. It's just a thud and done.
I think the problem that I had with the second team offensive line was I didn't necessarily think they were getting to the second level quick enough. And I think to the detriment of the running backs carrying the ball, it allowed the linebackers to kind of get in those gaps and full on stop them with probably only 1 or 2 yard gains. And so for that reason, that's a big area that I think we're all looking at going into this Friday as well. Yeah,
100%. That not being able to climb to that second level, as you said, led to a lot of like the running back meeting the linebacker in the hole and not really going anywhere else. And I don't fault fault the running backs for that necessarily. You know, like you got to kind of get the support. Somebody for the Falcons who was meeting a lot of running backs in the hole was Josh Woods. He was a player. I thought the linebackers in particular, they get a little bit of short shrift during training camp and the preseason when the full team drills are happening because they're kind of like right there in the middle, and it's easier to look at the pass rush or the secondary and not necessarily those guys right in the heart of it. But I thought all week long Josh Woods has been really good at filling that hole, kind of reading the flow of the offense and then adjusting and finding his space to then make the impact right there at the line of scrimmage. So Josh Woods is a player that we haven't given a ton of love to. He's probably also fighting for a special teams kind of reserve role there, but I thought he's played well the last few days. So let's go ahead and start talking a little bit more about joint practices. We mentioned kind of that reserve offensive line group in the run game when they're in there, but was there anything else that over the span of 2 days really kind of stood out to you, Terrin?
Oh, gosh. Today is more recent mind, a.k.a. Wednesday. I almost said Thursday.
It feels like a Thursday, big Thursday energy, but yeah.
But Wednesday, with all the scuffles that happened, I think you saw a bunch of fire within this team. And something that surprised me is like when it was just Falcons on Falcons, it was the defense that was kind of getting the chirpiest. But today, I wasn't over there, so I'll let Tori talk about it. The offense was the chirpiest. And special teams, which we know has my heart, was chirpy. So it was just interesting. It wasn't what I expected, and I think that has stood out most. But besides that, I think yesterday was a completely different day of practice than today, where yesterday I think you walked away thinking the Falcons, quote-unquote, won the joint practice against the Titans, whereas today I think the Titans showed up thinking they had more to prove or had to like step up their game. Because I wonder, I mean, Calvin Ridley did call out social media while scoring a touchdown against the Falcons defense today, so just all of social media, so he knows about what people were saying yesterday. So I think the Titans came in today something with more to prove, and maybe that heightened the emotions. Not saying they won, it just was a very different practice.
I think for me, my observations are kind of twofold. I'll start with the idea of I feel like this defensive front, what they did on Friday night against the Lions was not a mirage based on what we have seen them do the last 2 days. I think they have been very impressive. They were very impressive on Friday night, collapsing the pocket. I thought that they were very impressive, especially yesterday on Tuesday, making Cam Ward incredibly uncomfortable. A few times you see LaCale London, Ruka Rororo, Brandon Dorless, Zach Harrison in the lap of Cam Ward. And I think that it was obvious how much pressure he has been under the last couple of days based on the intensity that defensive front has been playing with. And then my second note on something that I found to be something that is incredibly interesting to me based on the conversations we're talking about within the 53-man roster is Natrone Brooks establishing himself as the first cornerback off the bench. This is a guy who we have been talking about ad nauseum over the course of camp of really showing up and playing well. And he, starting yesterday, they were actually during the team periods, he was getting some run with the ones. He was subbing in for Mike Hughes, playing alongside A.J. Terrell. He was subbing in for A.J. Terrell to play alongside Mike Hughes, getting those reps to almost simulate what happens if one of those guys goes down. And so he's someone who, as we're talking about the D'Angelo Malones of the world, he is somebody who I think is shooting up that 53-man roster in terms of importance. And seeing that along with what was happening along the defensive front, I thought was incredibly indicative of what this defense wants to be.
Yeah, I love that. Sorry, you got it.
Well, I was going to piggyback off that a little bit because it just reminded me of someone who I noted today was Mike Ford, because he was rotating with D. Alford among the first team defense. So I think it's nice to see how much they are cultivating that depth in the secondary, because we talk about the rotation so much up front with the defensive linemen and the edge rushers. And so to know that they're building that in the backfield also, not that they're going to rotate nearly as often, but if someone were to go down, they have options who are proving themselves not just with the second team, but with the first team unit itself.
Yeah, I think that's an important note because you could have an injury at any point, right? It could be the first snap of the game, and all of a sudden now that second team player is starting for the rest of the game. And so having these extended periods where it doesn't necessarily matter as much, but you are able to get that continuity developing of I'm just hearing somebody else's voice that I'm not used to giving me that information is important. But we haven't done a great job of sticking with our camp champ, much to the chagrin of a vocal minority. But I do think Natron Brooks would be definitely in the running right now for camp champ. Maybe he and Casey Washington. Like that, we should just line those two up in a one-on-one at the end of training camp and just be like, which I guess is today, is the official end of training. We should have done that afterwards is, all right,
guys.
You guys head-to-head, mano-a-mano.
Yeah.
But the defensive line in particular, that is going to be something that I think is the takeaway for me from all of training camp is just the energy, the vibe, the rotation, the number of guys coming in. And I caught up with Peter Skoronski, the offensive lineman for Tennessee, because you guys did a great job locking down the Falcons media availability. So I just meandered on over to the much more laid back, like Tennessee guys walking off the field and stopped him. And I was just like, tell me a little bit about your experience going against this defensive line. And he was like, man, you can tell the influence of kind of Raheem Morris's idea and Jeff Holbrook's ideas and kind of like meshing them together, and specifically the rotation. He was like, I hate that. I hate that so much. As an offensive lineman, I got to be out there just every single snap, and now I see another 4 sets of dudes like running onto the field, fresh legs, all of that stuff. So you understand the mindset and the mentality that this defense is trying to bring and how they're going to make life harder, kind of the way Tyler Algier does in the fourth quarter on defenses. They want to do that to opposing offenses and wear them down.
So one note I will add on this is talking to Brandon Dorless on Tuesday. He made the comment, he was like, Nate Ollie, who's the defensive line coach for the Falcons, has made it a point to tell this defensive front, you will not play more than 4 plays in a row. If you get to number 5, you're coming out. And it's because, to your point, they want that fresh, violent energy to go up against these linemen that, let's be honest, if you get to number 5, play number 5, and you're moving and you're shaking and all that kind of stuff, you get a fresh James Pierce Jr. coming at you after 4 bouts with Leonard Floyd, I think that's going to matter, especially as you get deep into the season and guys' legs aren't as fresh. You are feeling the grind of a regular season. So to your point, I think that's a very interesting note that Brandon Dorless gave. You get 4 plays. If you get to 5, you're coming out.
You're making me think of like putting a whole new set of tires on a race car during a pit stop. Like that's basically what this, and you just, all right, we're going to pull in, boom, 4 more, get out there.
4 tires, Sunoco fuel.
There you go. So let's go ahead and pivot to the next preseason game, which will take place Friday, 7 o'clock kickoff inside of Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Now that we've seen 2 days, we're going to get our own little pit stop on Thursday, a break, before the action. What do you want to see, Tori, out there on Friday night? Is there anybody in particular that you're going to be locked in on?
David Sills the 5th. I feel like I have a really great idea of what this defense is and who they are already, even despite the fact that we haven't even seen the first team defense go out and get, some real live reps. To me, I am very curious to see if there is any way that someone like David Sills the 5th can make this 53-man roster. Because, and this goes back to something that we've talked about so much, like, okay, for a fact, you can pencil in Drake London, Darnell Mooney, probably Kadero Hodge, probably Jamal Agnew, Casey Washington, and Ray McLeod.
There you go.
That is
sorry.
I
we're
went,
getting to Ray.
Sorry. I was kind of maybe I went in alphabetical order and didn't even notice.
That would be amazing.
That would be crazy.
Like a savant over here.
That would be crazy. So those are your 6. Can you make a spot for David Sills the 5th?
Has he played special teams? Have we seen him play special teams?
I think he has. He was,
okay.
Yes. And I think that what we have seen him over the course of the last 2 days, he's getting reps with the ones. I don't know if you can carry 7 receivers. I really don't. I don't know on this roster if you can do that.
Not when you're carrying like 17 defensive linemen.
Exactly. And so for me,
tough.
it's like, it's really, I want to see him establish himself the way that maybe Dylan Drummond did on Friday night, kind of have some more opportunities to get some balls thrown his way, because I do think he can make a case to make this 53-man roster, and if anything, be a practice squad elevation down the road, because from what we have seen from him specifically, getting some work in with the ones alongside Drake London, or even, heck, in Drake London's spot if Drake is not out there, I think that's valuable.
Yeah, and the Falcons have said, they take an expanded view of all of it. They look at the practice squad in addition to that active roster. So you're right. If he doesn't make the 53, they view that extra expanded practice squad as an extension, and maybe they make that call up. What about you, Terrin?
We've already discussed the second offensive line along with the run game needing to improve in this preseason game. So otherwise, I think something that has perked my ears up, I don't know if it's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. But Raheem Morris left the door open for Kirk Cousins playing in the preseason game. And I'm just going to leave it at that because he left it at that without saying yes or no.
Yeah.
Yeah, he got a lot of run the last couple of days, so it'll be. But he also said, Kirk is among those players, right? Those veterans where I'm going to chat with him a little bit. He knows as much as anybody about what he needs to get ready to go in a season.
Crack door.
Yeah, exactly. It'll
Not
give
wide
us
open.
a period of entertainment in the lead up to the hours up to that preseason game. We can go ahead and lock in and see if number 18 is out there. We talked about it at the beginning, so I'll bring it full circle here to close it out. I think it's that backup offensive line. Like how to Kyle Hinton, Javon Gwynn. They just made a signing this week to add kind of competition at that
Jake
center
Hansen.
position. Jake Hansen, thank you. Joshua Gray, those guys. Like, how does that interior line look out there? Is really kind of the number one thing I want to see. So, cool. Well, that was a nice long 2 days of joint practices.
Yeah.
I'm exhausted. Terrin and I are not any tanner. I don't know how that's possible.
Don't loop me into this.
All right, you got a nice red. I'm not any tanner. I'll take that. I'll take the blame on that. But
Kitchen strays.
sorry. We do have a great interview with Wes Durham coming up for you all right after this. So that is going to do it for us, and we will see you all on Monday for our first final whistle of the preseason. But until then, everybody, take care. Wes Durham joins us now. Of course, the minute he speaks, you will know exactly who he is because he is the legendary play-by-play.
Wow, legendary?
Legendary.
It just means I've been doing it a long time, Will.
How long?
This will be 22.
Man.
And never.
all 22 with
Dave and I've been since 2004. We started, ironically, let's see, I got the job 22 years ago, 2004, roughly right in this neighborhood of the last. I got the job essentially about 9 days before the first preseason game in 2004.
Wow.
They were still having training camp at Furman. I got a phone call. Jeff Hollinger, people who, if you know, had done the games, and he was leaving to go to Tampa to take a TV job, and the job had come open. I had done preseason games 99, 2000, 2001 when the games were at WGST at the time. And they called and said, would you be interested in the job? And I was still doing Georgia Tech. And, at about 72 hours later, I was interested in the job and talking to people about the job and then doing some stuff. And it all worked out, and it's been unbelievable since.
Heck of a first season, 2004.
Yeah, no kidding. It was NFC Championship game in a blizzard in Philadelphia, or on the back end of a blizzard in Philadelphia. And we've had some pretty good moments since then. We've had some tough ones, no question, but at the same time, it's been fun.
Just a little, scene setter for us. Now going into your 22nd training camp, right?
Yeah.
Like, what do you look for at this time of year to get a sense, like, what is real and what's not for you?
That's a really good question. It's one I'm asked a lot in the offseason. Like, how do you think they're going to be is the general question when somebody finds out kind of what I do. They'll say, how do you think they're going to be? And this is the first time in a long time that I didn't have some, pre-constructed comment about it because I really didn't know. I do think that the fight is going to be on in the division literally from game 1 to game 17. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to last that long. I think that if we see a team, get a big running start in this division, it'll be a big surprise because I think all 4 teams have kind of fortified themselves a little bit to be better than they were. Now, Tampa's obviously had a run, but they didn't run away with this last year. Atlanta was right there. So I think it's going to be really interesting. That's number one. I think this team is going to be, and it was pointed out by Raheem last week, that this is going to be a combination of a youth movement and a veteran element.
Yep.
It just feels like that some of that can work here. And it worked to their advantage. I think the coordinator change with Jeff coming back as the defensive coordinator, certainly a positive one so far. But Tori and I were talking in the process of camp. I'm intrigued as much by the other coaching elements on the staff as I am just here's Zach Robinson, here's Jeff Ulbrich, here's Marquise Williams. I think guys like Nate Ollie, right? DJ Williams. We're starting to hear about other guys. We know Jerry Gray's here. We know some of those. But there are guys that are a fascinating case study as to why is it we heard so much going into camp about Nate Ollie? Mm-hmm. And now we're hearing a lot about DJ Williams as it relates to Michael Penix. We know TJ Yates is around. We know Zach Robinson's around. But there is a chemistry element of that process with the coaching staff. I do think some of it will play out through the preseason, but I think once we get into the regular season, then we start to find maybe the microcosm, if you will, of what their impact is on this team in really both respects, offense and defense.
I know it's still early, and you don't ever find out like who a team is or what their identity is until well into the season and when it's probably established. But for you, is there a feeling around the team right now that reminds you of any team in the last 20 years?
I'm really bad at recalling specific years here. I can recall players.
Okay? Yeah.
Throw them out. We'll help.
So here's kind of where I am on this, and it didn't take me long to draw this kind of comparison. We haven't really had any, as Arch likes to call them, pile scrapers since Harvey Dahl and Tyson Clabo were in the offensive line.
Yep.
It feels like now that Matthew Bergeron and Ryan Newsel and Chris Lindstrom and to a degree Caleb and Jake, who are the much more familiar pieces, if you will, it feels like we got some pile scrapers, right? And maybe Bergeron has moved himself into the pile scraping mode. Now, why are they pile scrapers? Because the early things with James Pierce, okay? And we hadn't had anybody like that in a while.
Yeah, very true.
Who's willing to bring the fight when it's your own team and you're not wearing pads, okay? So I respect kind of the emotions and the momentum of both those and think that that is a potential playing personality once we get going. Look, we got 3 preseason games, by the way, and then you start the season in weeks 1 and 2 against teams that were double-figure win teams a year ago. I mean, it's a lot. And so I see where that kind of energy can really help this team. Because I don't know, you guys will talk about the schedule back and forth. I think the first 4 are pretty big before the bye.
Yep.
I think those 4 games, if you box them up and said any 4 the rest of the year, I'd pick those 4.
Yeah.
Just because of who they are, where they are, that kind of Tampa the way last year went. Minnesota because of what happened up there last year. Washington, yep. Carolina. I mean, they're all kind of sitting right there in that nice little bracket before the bye week. So I think it's going to be a team that does, and Raheem used this term too, edge. I think this team's going to play with an edge. I think it's going to be on both sides of the ball. That's kind of – we haven't had the offensive line edge, if you will. We had it some with the Super Bowl team, right? But not like the Clabo, Dahl, McClure, guys you wanted to talk to on the bus going to the airport. Clabo, who came up and acted really nice to you, and you were like, God, he is such a jack on game days. Yeah. Or Harvey Dahl, who I'll never forget, just went downfield one time and cleaned some guy out and got a flag, and I'm thinking, that's okay. That's a message you wanted to send. Yeah. So we'll see how it goes, but I am intrigued to kind of see it once it gets going.
I mean, one of the kind of scuffles out there during practice was kind of a moment like that where it was a double team, I think, on James. And Caleb just kind of just kept holding him the whole time, but you could tell that James wasn't backing down either. So, yeah, you've got this kind of immovable object, unstoppable force mentality, at least, I think.
Yeah, and there are other guys on this team who have that kind of playing personality. I mean, Tori and I have talked in the offseason a little bit, and the one that drives me crazy is Divine Diablo because I saw him as a college player, as a safety. And now knowing kind of what he does for this team, I am really gunned up about what he can be.
Same, yep.
Right. I mean, I just think he fits it. And then his impact on other guys. And that goes back to the whole, youth movement, veteran element composition of this football team. And, I can hear everybody going, well, all 32 other teams are just like that. Yeah, but this one is a little unique, I think, in just the dynamic of timing more than anything else. And sometimes it is about timing.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys know the history of this franchise. Sometimes you just kind of walk into it.
Yeah.
And it feels somehow like maybe that's to their advantage again this year too.
I think the word, we're talking about playing with an edge, but I also think the word that this offense specifically wants to be known for is explosion. Being an explosive offense. And I'm curious, even in the 3 games that we saw of Michael Penix, what your impression was of him and what needs to happen in order for him to take the next step to potentially be the guy super long term down the road as well.
I think this has really probably been a very different season from a year ago for him.
Mm-hmm.
Long before camp started, long before certainly we play the year. I thought one of the things that benefited him so much last year when he was given those 3 games was the fact he played a lot of college football. Mm-hmm. And the term I came away with at the end of last year was he throws guys open. I think his arm is big enough to do that. I think now we get to find out how many variables there are in Zach Robinson's playbook for Michael Penix to make plays. Look, we're not talking about Lamar Jackson's speed, but we are talking about a guy who can make plays with his feet.
Yeah, he's athletic.
Yeah, he is very athletic. We're all enamored about he and Kyle Pitts in their golf game, along with their ability to connect, because we've been waiting on Kyle since his rookie year. But the reality of this is Michael Penix has to orchestrate the offense here.
Yes.
He's got to make Bijan Robinson a top 5 running back. He's got to make Drake London top 5 wide receiver. Given Darnell Mooney's health, what will he be able to contribute? Can he come back toward those numbers a year ago? And then how does Kaderil Hodge figure in? How does some of these other guys coming along? I just think Michael Penix's wiring is going to be exposed this year. Last year it was just the physical gifts, the ability to rip it, make the decisions, drive the team late against Washington, stuff like that. This year we get to find out if he's got that kind of killer mentality from game 1 on, that winning mentality. We got spoiled around here for a long time with that. And Michael had moments at Washington, not so much at Indiana, although there were a couple. He did have some moments at Washington where, he drove them to win. In that year, they ultimately ended up in the national championship game, won at Oregon. I do believe he is more in that acumen than we realize, but we haven't seen it, except for the one drive in D.C. So that's the one thing I'm looking forward to. I'm also been pretty impressed with his poise in handling all this. Some guys get ahead of themselves. That's not been the case, at least so far with him, I think.
Yeah, we've talked, a good bit so far and came about his kind of maturity and the confidence, but that it's been very true to himself, right? And that's the biggest thing with a quarterback is it can't be fake. And I know the Washington game was a great moment for him. I feel like that touchdown run against Carolina in Week 18.
Sure.
I felt a little bit of that kind of like competitive, like you're not getting me down, I'm making this play by myself vibe from him.
Yeah.
So, but you're right, the ability to orchestrate an offense and what does he bring to an offense that allows them to kind of open it up and have these week-to-week maybe wrinkles that other teams then have to really game plan against, or it takes time away from some of the other things. What does Michael Penix bring to that? So early on, do you still expect, knowing the great running backs, the great offensive line, this is still a running offense, right? Or do you think adding a big arm with Michael Penix changes that to some degree?
No, I think you're right. I think the usage rate of Tyler Algier will be interesting. Bijan Robinson's usage rate will be high.
Has to be.
It has to be high, and it should be high, right?
Yeah.
But what is Tyler Algier's usage rate? Look, we all understand the math of the National Football League, right? I mean, this is a big year for Tyler Algier. It's a big year, invariably a big year for Drake London, Kyle Pitts. We understand that on the offensive side. And I agree with Penix. If it all goes right, this can be an incredibly gifted unit.
Yes.
But you got to have it go right, and you got to get off to the good start. I'm curious to see, and I think Warren Sharp does the football analysis, and I think he's got great information. Tyler Algier did not play more than 20 snaps in the last 4 or 5 games of the year. Weird.
Yeah.
And when you look at the number, you think, oh, no, wait a second. He was on the field more than that. And then you realize the bulk of his work was week 7 through 10, somewhere along in there, right? It felt like in the middle of the year he had the big game in Charlotte when Arch coined him the bowling ball of knives or whatever it was, razors and knives.
Blades.
Yeah, razor blades. That's
Amazing work.
And it was hilarious.
Yeah.
So you did see a high usage rate for him, but did we ever get to I know you guys talked about this last year. Did we ever really get to a combination of he and Bijan together where there was an impact to be made?
There was one. It was against the Steelers week 1, and there was one specific play that they had them both in the backfield. It was a handoff to Bijan, and I think it was a pickup of 7 or 8 yards, and then there was one other time,
notably,
the same thing, but it was a tackle for a loss a few weeks later.
Kansas City is the game that I'm thinking. It was that 4th down play.
Yeah,
4th and 2. They had both of them in there at the same time, and Tyler, not that he missed the block, but like I think that was his assignment.
Yeah.
Ultimately. So that was kind of the last time, because I remember being like, "Ooh, we're getting the 2 backs in here in a
very
pivotal
early,
moment."
and then we never really saw it after that.
Away.
Yeah,
and you wonder somewhere in the packaging, is there, we saw a lot of one back, 2 tight end situations last year. Is there some place this year where it's 11 personnel and it's Tyler Algiers the running back and Robinson somewhere lining up as a wide receiver?
I think it's very possible.
Yeah. I mean, because and look, everybody says they're 4-3, 3-4, whatever. They're all multiple, right? But the reality, Tori, right, is it feels like at some point you put both those guys out there, and if you can do it the right way, especially up front, you can handle the blocking up front. How much of that happened post-Cousins? Not much, if any, because Algier, as we just stated, was not on the field that much. So I'm curious to see what they can get to. I don't think we'll see it in the preseason,
right?
But I think we'll get to it at some point, and I'm curious on the usage rate of Tyler in particular, especially early in the campaign, as to how that works for him and what's the checks and balances with Bijan, because clearly he's a showstopper.
Absolutely.
So you brought him up, and I'm going to bring him back up again because he is basically the enigma of this offense, and it's Kyle Pitts. And what this 5th year could look like for him. And I know I asked Robert Mays this question, and I've asked some different people, but like, what does a successful year for Kyle Pitts look like when you have a rookie year that you are trying to replicate and you never really get back to that?
Yeah.
What does this 5th year look like? If what does that success look like? Do we need to change the way we're thinking about Kyle Pitts?
It feels like it's been years and years. I mean, like a decade since he caught the touchdown pass in London.
Yes.
Remember that?
Yes.
I mean, TD pass from Matt Ryan in London feels like it was 3 presidential administrations ago.
And also, that was the only touchdown he scored at all that year.
Yeah,
that
got one in the Pro Bowl.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was the only
well done on you, Will.
Yeah.
For those of you scoring on the Pro Bowl, by the way.
Yeah.
That's what
Will McFadden's got you all your Pro Bowl highlights coming up next here.
Yep.
That was important because it was the only touchdown that he scored on U.S. soil.
That's why I remember it. That's why I remember it. So
okay.
It does feel like forever ago.
Because it was.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the dynamic here about Kyle Pitts. Okay, highest drafted tight end, right? The whole 9 yards. We remember that.
Yeah.
Second part is he's coming to a city who really has had not only a Hall of Fame tight end, Tony Gonzalez, has had very successful, underrated Pro Bowl tight ends in their history.
Yep.
I mean, Algie Crumpler, come on.
We literally this summer were talking about Algie Crumpler for probably 10 straight minutes.
He was my favorite player growing up, outside of Mike, of course. But
Algernon Darius Crumpler from Wilmington, North Carolina. So, all that being said, Kyle came in and had to operate with those expectations already built in. Okay? You come in under one coach, you end up with another, blah, blah, blah.
Quarterback.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's the other one. You go from the greatest quarterback in franchise history to then you go through the carousel of Mariota, Desmond Ritter. By the way, here's Taylor Heineke. Here comes Kirk Cousins, and now all of a sudden you're Michael Penix. No wonder they're golf buddies. He's trying to get a name tag, get a feel for the guy, figure it out. Hey, you threw me the ball in Washington. It was a great catch. Tell me what else you like to do.
We got a tea time. Let's go. Let's see on the first tee.
And I don't blame him. Yeah. But it gets back to the question of the sharing of the football here.
Yes,
I mean, what's the matchup going to look like? How are defenses going to key more on 7 than 8? Are they going to key on 5 more than 7? 7 and 5 are outliers in a scouting report, in my opinion. They're the 2 top names every week.
Yeah, I agree.
Then what does 9 do, and how does that impact 8? the one thing I've noticed in training camp, Kyle's been much more of a willing blocker in some things. In terms of things like Mike Johnson, who does the mornings here in Atlanta on radio. Stand behind him at one camp, and he'll say, man, oh, wait, pitch just, created a block and a path for a jump cut on a run game. There we go. Okay. So let's check on the investment. I don't disagree that Enigma is such a negative connotation in terms of the word. And it's frustrating for him as much as it is for any fan. And we totally understand that. And as broadcasters, you want to call his name in a game. That's the thing. When I notice they're in a bit of a down swoon with him is when I don't call his name much.
Yeah.
Interesting.
If I don't say his name much during a game, ball intended for whether it was completed or not, if you don't call his name much, you wonder, okay, has he disappeared from the plan? Have they just not been able to find a way? Feels like right now, with given the other weapons, he's not at the top of the old scouting report. I mean, think about it. He's not 1 or 2. Is he 3?
I think Darnell makes a strong argument at this point.
I go back to the conversation that I had with Robert Mays, which everybody can go check that out as well. But he was like, when I'm thinking about this offense, he's like, I don't really think about him. And that is like, that's hard to hear because you're talking about a number 4 overall pick. But like, if you're having people from the outside looking in from 5,000 feet up, like, and they're not really talking about him, like,
I mean, he's going to be on the roster. You know that he's locked.
For sure.
Yeah.
He and Charlie Warner are locked. The third tight end is going to be a fascinating piece of what Atlanta ultimately gets to here. But he has got to be a factor. And I wouldn't say we're boxing up those 4 games, Will. I'm not going to put as much pressure on those 4 as I am the long game.
Yeah. For sure.
I just want it to be start to finish. I'm just not really interested in flashes in the first 3 to 5.
76 yards and then 12 yards.
Right,
And then,
But then go back to ratios on targets per game.
Yes. Yeah.
Sometimes it goes 6, sometimes it's 2. A couple times it's been 1.
Yeah.
I mean, we go back to usage with Tyler Algier. We can have the same conversation as the year unfolds, I think, about Kyle Pitts, too.
And I think it's such an interesting way to look at it, where it's like when I'm saying his name more, like I feel like the offense is in a flow that they're maybe,
Yeah, I mean, look, when you've got the weaponry that Arch and I have been fortunate to call for 20-odd years here, you kind of know when it's rolling, okay? Yeah. And, like in the Super Bowl year, you were bang, 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 bang. And that's kind of what it feels like it has the chance to be. Not saying it will be, but it feels like it can do that. And if so, he's going to be a big part of that.
Well, the player I thought about when you were saying that was actually Harry Douglas. It reminded me a little bit of nobody would compare him to Julio or Roddy, but when Harry was getting the ball and successful at doing it, it was almost a sign that the entire offense was having a good day.
Yeah, okay. Let's go back to that team in this respect. Everybody knew how good Devontae Freeman was. But who scored the touchdown to open the second half for Atlanta? Tevin Coleman.
Yep.
See, that's what I mean about the combination at running back, too. When you've got 2 gears, how do you change those gears? Kyle Shanahan found ways to balance Freeman and Coleman together. I think Zach has the ability, certainly if they want to try and do that with Robinson and with Algier. They also did it in the throw game. Because remember who else was involved in that touchdown in the Super Bowl too? Rookie tight end from Stanford.
Austin Hooper.
Tight
end lineage.
See, Austin Hooper, Julio Jones, Harry Douglas, right? I mean, you had all this stuff stacked up. All this artillery was stacked up and ready to go. And, again, that's why I think Penix is not just saying it to say it. Although as a quarterback, you probably should, buy some optimism, buy some excitement. But there's reason to think that if all goes well, you can get toward that level they were, was it 10 years ago now?
Give or take. So that actually leads us right into kind of how we like to close out the podcast with this question. So it's a thought-provoking one where it's like a thought exercise.
I'm too old for thought-provoking questions.
That's all we've been doing today is we're just thinking.
All right.
So let's fast forward to January 2026, and you are calling the game for this team. And they have punched their ticket into the postseason.
Okay.
What is one thing that happened over the course of the regular season that got them there?
if they punch their ticket to the playoffs, they're going to have been decent against the run, and I mean that defensively, and they're going to win the turnover battle. I'm not caught up in the red zone stuff yet with this team. I just don't see that as kind of being one of those things. But I do believe they're going to have to stymie run, and they're going to have to win the turnover battle. They can't give the ball away. Last couple of years, last 3 years, I think the turnover stuff's just been, almost like a death nail.
Very, very lopsided in and also the timeliness, I think, of turnovers. It matters greatly as well.
Yeah, there have been things during the game, I keep this chart and make notes each week about percentage of scoring allowed in a quarter or percentage that they've scored in a quarter. And there have been quarters where they've been sub 15%. They can't have that happen this year either. Now, they also can't allow teams to score 40-odd% in the first half like they did, last couple of years. I think that's all really, really impactful. But to me, the two things are run defense and turnovers. If they do those two things – and the other part, too, is they've been kind of unfortunate with injuries. When you think about a couple of years ago, Grady Jarrett and the ACL tear, right? And then last year, you just never quite felt like they got it. DeMarco Hellams, to me, was going to have a huge season a year ago, and he would have been a perfect fit for what they're doing defensively. If they can stay away from the big injury, I think that's going to be critical too. And that's easy to say. Run defense and turnover margins a little bit more factual.
Yeah, and obviously, injuries are the main thing to kind of watch throughout the preseason, and just hope they can make it, to that week one relatively healthy. But totally agree. Wes, this was amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Your insight is always appreciated and welcome.
Will, you got the best voice on this podcast. What's the problem?
See, now you're lying to the people. We can't have you back.
You got the best hair on the podcast. How's that?
I'll take that.
Yeah.
I'll take that.
Quite a flow you got going there, Trevor. I mean, Will.
There we go. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening, and we will see you guys next time.